The age that my child came to me, it was pretty clear that this was the moment. Like I could capture this moment and use it as a point of really heartful, loving connection. And that if I didn't do that, the moment was going to go by. Hi, friends, and welcome to the Heartful Parent Podcast. I'm your host, Christy Keating. In this podcast, we talk about it all, our parenting, our partnering, and our professional lives, because they are all a part of us, and we were never meant to do this alone. Hello, and welcome for another episode of the Heartful Parent Podcast. It is the holiday season. We are in the thick of it. You may be feeling as I do, like things are just really busy. We had a shorter time between Thanksgiving and Christmas and Hanukkah this year and Kwanzaa, and it just feels like everything is happening sort of, on top of each other. At least it feels like that a little bit in my house. I try to sort of balance the idea of not putting too much pressure on myself and, making the holiday season untenable while also creating some magic and fun and connection opportunities for my family. What we are going to talk about today, I want to first start with a disclaimer. If you have children with you right now, especially children under the age of 10, 12, I'm going to suggest that given the topic, that you hit pause on this. And as I sometimes say, this is just not a kid-friendly podcast today, right? Some of them, it's fine if they listen along, whether they get it or not. This one, I'm going to say, this is not meant for young ears. So hit pause on that podcast and join me back here when you are on your own, when you've got your earbuds in, or you're in the car by yourself and can listen in privacy. Okay. Are you alone? Are you on your own? Okay, I'm going to keep moving forward as if the answer to that question is yes. Because today we're going to talk about, for those who celebrate Christmas, there is a question that will inevitably come, or a realization that will inevitably come in your child's life if you have sort of used or perpetuated or promoted the story and the myth of Santa. Now, I am not going to tell you that you shouldn't do that. I love Santa. I love the magic of it. And frankly, as an adult, I wish there was somebody that would come down my chimney once a year and leave me amazing presents, right? Books, right? Leave a book on the end of my bed. We always do that for our kids every Christmas Eve. Santa leaves them one present. It's always a book, leaves it at the end of their bed so that when they wake up in the morning, there's A, a gift there that makes them super excited, and B, something that keeps them busy until we wake up. And so, whatever it is, I wish there was this kind, generous soul who, without agenda, without needing reciprocity, would just come and leave me presents. But alas, that is not the way the world works. And so at some point, like I said, if you have, used that myth or taught your children that myth, there will come a moment where they realize, oh, maybe Santa's not real. And it will happen in one of a variety of ways. Somebody at school will tell them that, what's wrong with you? Don't you know Santa's not real? And in my experience, kids hear that a number of times before they actually believe it. That certainly was true for me. I know that was true for my older daughter. I suspect that is true currently for my younger daughter, who is 7 and is still a believer. But I know that kids have said things to her that have made her question, right? For me, when I was a child, I was an avid reader. I still am an avid reader. And I discovered that there was no Santa when I was reading a Judy Blume book. So I had loved Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing by Judy Blume. And then the sequel to it is Super Fudge. And I was reading Super Fudge. And in that book, full disclosure, great story, but it does reveal the reality of Santa. And my mom, who was an incredible, and still is an incredible parent, used to sort of read what I was reading ahead of me so that she knew like what was coming and could talk to me about things that were coming up in the books that I was reading. And she had read ahead. She knew it was coming in Super Fudge. She knew that the Santa myth was going to be blown up for me. And so she came into my bedroom that night and said, how are you? Like, how was the reading? And y'all, I was pissed. I was pissed. I was angry. I wouldn't talk to her. I was like just beside myself with, like not just the how could you lie to me, but what do you mean Santa isn't real? Like I was angry that he wasn't real. And then, because I catch on real quick, I remember saying to her, so does this mean the Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny aren't real either? Right. And it was a really rough night. And my mom, I think, although she knew it was coming, she wasn't prepared to really effectively help me manage that. And so, what I really want to give you today are some ideas or some ways to help your child realize that. Or if you feel like it's time to reveal the myth, the story to them before they kind of find it out in a negative way, then this might also work. And, obviously I have a sample set of one, although I've heard from other parents about how this has worked for them. And that is my older daughter. And my older daughter, Macy, came to me a number of years ago. She's 15 now. So I'm trying to remember the exact year that this came about, but she was 8 or maybe 9. And she said to me one night, kind of out of the blue, Mom, is Santa real? And I had thought, fortunately, I had thought about this a little bit beforehand. And I paused and took a deep breath. I think I was washing the dishes at the time. She was behind me. And I paused and I took a deep breath to gather myself because I wanted to handle this in a heartful, loving, connected way. And so I turned around and I said, well, what do you think, honey? Right? What do you think? And she went on to explain why she had her doubts and that she suspected that I was actually Santa. Her dad and I were actually Santa. And, I could have lied. I could have tried to perpetuate the story a little longer, but the cat was out of the bag, right? The reality of this was going to hit sooner or later. And I decided that this was not the moment to lie to my child, right? Yes, we had told the story and I stand by that, right? I really do stand by that, the telling of the story. And listen, side note, if you're thinking, well, this is exactly why we don't do Santa or why we never have said it's real, totally fine. Like, if that works for you, kudos on you, right? Like, I applaud you. I think this is not a one size fits all thing. And so many families will say that Santa's real. Some will say Santa's not real. I hope those families who say that Santa's not real encourage their kids to not spill the beans to those kids who are believers because there's magic in it. But, if you are a family who has said it's real, when your child comes to you with rationale or reasons about why they think maybe Santa's not real, that's the time to let it go. Right? We don't want to double down at that moment. And maybe if they're 4, it's different than if they're 8 or 9. But at the age that my child came to me, it was pretty clear that this was the moment. Like I could capture this moment and use it as a point of really heartful, loving connection. And that if I didn't do that, the moment was going to go by. I would miss out on it. And anything that came after would just not be as connected. And like we would have lost the moment. So the first piece of advice I have for you is to sort of be ready for this in advance if you can. Think about how you want to handle it. And when the moment comes up, like seize it. And to help you gather yourself, you can turn that question back around, right? If they say, I think you're Santa, or I know Santa's not real, kids at school said that, right? We can start with a question. Why do you think Santa's not real? Why do you think kids are saying that? You know, why do you believe them? Like, why do you think what they're saying is true? Like, talk to me a little bit about that, right? And we can do that in a really loving way. And we can, sit down with our kids and really open up the conversation. And then what we can do is, instead of letting it be this big wah, 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 right? This big sad thing, is we can actually invite them in to the magic of the moment. We can invite them into the magic that is the Christmas season, for those who celebrate, the magic of the Santa story, because that's really what it's all about. It's about magic. And, if your child discovers this, like not in the holiday season, but like, it comes out because they stop believing in the Easter Bunny or in the Tooth Fairy or whatever it might be, the same approach can really take place, where we really want to approach this from a spirit of magic and love and connection to one another, right? And if we can enter the conversation from that mindset, I think we are already winning. And then I've already shared with you that I'm an avid reader, but in many different aspects of parenting, there are places, times and places where I think books can be immensely helpful, and they can really lend something new to the conversation or articulate what we might be thinking in a more beautiful way than we are able to in the moment. Because there may also be some emotion to this for you, right? I remember when my older daughter discovered that Santa wasn't real, when she asked me that question, there was a joy and an excitement to bringing her into the magic of it. And there was also a sadness because my little girl was growing up, right? And the frankly harsh reality of the world was coming crashing in. And this was just the first evidence of that. And I wanted to keep the joy of that alive as long as I could. But I was able to do it in a way that really brought her into the magic. And I think diffused any anger or sadness, that she may have been feeling. Certainly there wasn't anger coming from her. There was maybe some sadness, but her response was really different than the way that I responded when I learned about this when I was young. So the two books that I really love, and if you're watching me, I'm holding these up. If you're not watching me, even if you are, I will drop links to these books in the show notes. But the first one is called Love, Santa. It's written by a woman named Martha Brockenbrough, illustrated by Lee White. And it is an incredibly lovely book. And it really chronicles a little girl named Lucy who writes letters to Santa every year. And what I love is the book, and if you can see me, like there's actual envelopes inside the pages with letters that you can pull out and read, right? So this is a letter from Lucy to Santa, which is like, Dear Santa, the North Pole is freezing. How do you stay warm? Love, Lucy. And then the next page is a letter that is written ostensibly from Santa to Lucy. Oops, not on that page. It's written from Santa to Lucy. And this goes on for a couple of years. And then at some point, Lucy writes a letter. And instead of leaving it out for Santa, she leaves it on her mom's pillow. And it basically says, Are you Santa? And then there's this absolutely lovely letter that is shared in response from Lucy's mom, this time not from Santa. And it says, it sort of recognizes that this is a really valid question and one that Lucy's wanted the answer to for a long time. And then says, no, I'm not Santa. There is no one Santa, right? And she kind of goes on and says, I'm the person who fills your stockings with presents and, chooses them and wraps them and puts them under the tree, the same way that my mom did for me and the same way that her mom did for her. And yes, Daddy helps too. I imagine that you will someday do this for your children, but this won't make you Santa. And then she goes on to explain in such a lovely way that Santa is bigger than any person, and that his work has gone on longer than any of us has lived, and what he does is simple but powerful. And then she uses this letter as a way of connecting Lucy to the magic of Santa, but also the fact that what Santa does is it connects us. It brings love and joy and magic and hope. And it is such a lovely way of framing what might be an otherwise really sad or angering, maddening time for a kid. And it puts it into such a lovely light. So she wraps up the letter saying, "So no, I am not Santa. Santa is love and magic and hope and happiness. I'm on his team, and now you are too." And so what I love about that is it lets the child, Lucy in this case, feel like, oh, now I'm a part of the magic, which means I get to participate in the magic. And I have to tell you that my older daughter, has transformed into this human, teenage human who, sure, she loves to get gifts on Christmas, but she finds, I would say, about as much joy in giving gifts and being a part of that Santa spirit. And, certainly we have fostered that in other ways with her. But I think this kind of introduction into the way the Santa thing works certainly supported that teaching. The second book that I really love comes from, there really was an article that was years ago, put into I believe it was the Baltimore Sun, if I'm remembering, which was a newspaper, where a little girl named Virginia wrote, "Dear editor," or something, "is there a Santa? Is Santa real?" Yeah, it was in 1897. I'm just looking at the book right now. In 1897, this little girl wrote to the Baltimore Sun and said, "Is Santa real?" And the response back from the newspaper has become sort of historic. And now there's this lovely book called "Yes, Virginia, There Is a Santa Claus," that is written by Chris Plehal, pictures by James Bernardin. And like I said, I'll put a link for this. And it sort of unfolds the story of how Virginia came to write this letter, and then it outlines, or it shares, what the response was. And I want to just sort of share some of what was written, because I think this really echoes the book by Martha Brackenbrow. And preceding this is a moment where Virginia sort of talks about the fact that her friends have said Santa's not real. And the editor says, "Virginia, your little friends are wrong. They do not believe except for what they see. Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. He exists as certainly as love and generosity and devotion exist. How dreary would the world be if there was no Santa Claus? It would be as dreary as if there were no Virginias. There would be no childlike faith then, no poetry, no romance. The eternal light with which childhood fills the world would be extinguished. No Santa Claus? Thank God he lives, and he lives forever. 1,000 years from now, Virginia, nay, 10,000 years from now, he will continue to make glad the heart of childhood." And I just love those words. I love the idea that this story, if we let it, can be the heart of hope, right? The place from which hope springs, especially in a time of year when it feels pretty dark outside in many parts of the world. And when we're looking forward to the new year with perhaps some trepidation, we could all use a little bit more hope and joy and love and connection. And so I think if you read the books to your children, great. If you don't, but you approach their questions with the spirit of these two books, with the idea that Santa is something bigger than the gifts. It's something bigger than us. And it really can be a place for joy, hope, and connection to grow. And I think that is how we answer the question from our child from a space of heart. Now, I want to add a couple of caveats or a couple of additions onto what I've just shared. One, you may have a child who asks you in the presence of their younger siblings. In that moment, I think it's okay to say, of course, Santa's real. And then as quickly as possible, pull the child who asked, right, aside and start the really heartful conversation and say, you know what, kiddo, you asked me a little while a really important question. And because your sister or your brother was there, I answered that in a particular way. But I want to talk further about that. And I wanted to ask you, why did you ask that question? What was your thought process, right? And then we can go to what I shared earlier, where we dig in with a question and then we share the reality. Second thing I want to say is, some of you listening have teenagers, and they clearly already know that Santa is not, this magical human that comes down your chimney. But that doesn't mean that we have to let go of the hope or the spirit of it. And so if you are parenting a teen, as I am, I would invite you this year to think about how might you bring them in to the story that is Santa, to the hope and the joy and the love and the connection that story can bring us. Maybe that's through helping support a family who doesn't have the means or the resources to provide Christmas for their children. Maybe that's through providing surprise gifts for neighbors or loved ones. Maybe that's through, just helping you bring Christmas to the rest of the family, or to their younger siblings if they have them. And maybe that's through just conversations that you have about what is the real spirit of Christmas. And is it about the presents, or is it about something more than that? And whether you come at this from a religious perspective or not, my family is not religious, but I love the story and the magic of this time of year. I am a huge fan of the Christmas and a huge fan of what this time of year can do for us, as humans, if we let it. So I hope those thoughts are helpful for you, whether you are in the thick of parenting this, imagining that you might be parenting it at some point down the road, or whether it feels like it's already past. I'll leave you with the question of, wherever you are on that journey, how can you make this season, whether you've, told the Santa story or not, whether you celebrate Christmas or don't, whether you're religious or not, how can you bring some joy, some connection, some magic, and some hope as we round out 2024? All right, friends, thanks so much for joining me for another episode of the Heartful Parent Podcast. I am so grateful, as always, for you. If this was helpful to you, share this. Would you do me that favor? Share the episode with a parent who you know is in the midst of this, who this might support. And then, as always, we were never meant to parent alone. It is not something that you are expected to know how to do and how to do perfectly. And I love that my job is to support parents on their journey. The Heartful Parent Academy is one way that I do that, and I would love to see you inside, where I can offer regular, personalized, individualized support to you and your family as I get to know you and your children, not just generic, advice or thoughts on the pod. All right. In the show notes, you will find links for both of those books, as well as the Heartful Parent Academy and a blog article that I wrote about this a number of years ago. I hope you'll check out each of those and bring a little magic to your world this week. Cheers, everyone. I'll see you next week. Hey friends, a quick postscript here. I just, during this episode recommended the fabulous book by Martha Brackenbrow called Love, Santa. And unfortunately, in getting ready to get this podcast published and writing the show notes, I discovered very sadly that the book is currently out of print. Now, you may be able to find it in, some places where used books are sold online and in person, but at least on Amazon, you're not currently able to get the book. So with that in mind, I am sharing the blog article that I wrote in the show notes that does have a copy of the final letter that the mom writes to Lucy in that story. And so you can still get the spirit of it. You can still read that letter if you want to. And of course, the Yes, Virginia, There Is a Santa Claus book is a wonderful supplement as well. I will mention I looked on Amazon and there are some other books that might also address this. There's one called The Wonderful Truth About Santa. And although I cannot personally attest to this story, I'm going to share a link for that just because it gets really good ratings from lots of folks. And that may be another lovely way to help address this with your family. So I'm so sorry. I didn't realize the book was out of print when I suggested it. But as I said, the letter is shared in the show notes in the blog article that's there. And the other books are still ready and available for you. So those should support you on this journey as you help the magic continue even after the myth is gone. All right, cheers, everyone.